Here's the third recording of the read-aloud for The Great Adventures of Angelica Cherry for Quercus, Minora, and the 8 Elemental Stones, Book 1. Last time we left off partway through page 12, and I'm going to start over from there again at the beginning of 12. The three of them left the captain's quarters, and they climbed downstairs and onto the gun deck, where the captain ordered one of the shipmates to lift anchor. "These are fine men who work this ship," said Captain Vega. "I have never seen a better crew, if I do say so myself." He walked the princess through to the stairs that led down to the hold of the ship. Cool air whisked past Angelica as she stepped inside. Captain Vega told Angelica, "Down here, we will keep all the necessities and supplies that His Majesty the King has given us for you, and any other provisions that you pick up along the way. Should you choose to walk for any part of the journey, we will support you from the sky and come to your aid whenever you need. Contact me if we are apart, but you need us to come." Handing her an odd-looking object that resembled a jumble of stones tied together at the end of a stick, he said, "This is a transceiver. It uses a small fulgur stone to send a signal to a transceiver that I always have with me." They continued with their quick tour, climbing to the forecastle of the vessel, where the helm was. It was finally time for the ship to depart and take Angelica away from a life of enclosure. Angelica walked over to the handrail of the ship's helm and rested her hand on the railing. She looked down at the castle, which was slowly getting further away, and at her parents and the many townspeople who were watching her go. She waved one last time as the ship floated up and away from her home. She felt a little sad to leave her people and be away from everyone, but she was excited to go as well. She turned away from the castle to see the captain give his next orders. "Fold the sails! Look sharp, men! We're off!" shouted Captain Rendell as he turned the ship's wheel halfway around while tilting it up, thus triggering the propellers of the sky cruiser to tilt as well as and propel the great vessel through the sky. The flying ship gained elevation as the helm swayed in the direction of the forest and Oakfeather. As the ship took flight, Angelica felt a significant shift in balance for the first time since she got on the vessel. The force of the rising ship brought her stomach up into her throat, and she had to struggle to get her footing. A crisp and refreshing breeze rushed past her ears, causing them to twitch and her fur to stand on end. The sound of the propellers grew louder as they drove the vessel through the cloudless sky. Soon the great oak tree, which was only faintly visible from her home, began to loom out of the center of the forest like a towering pillar. "So this is the village of Oakfeather," Angelica thought to herself, amazed at finally seeing the wondrous tree that she had always dreamt of visiting. It stood even taller and more majestic than she had ever imagined. It took almost an hour for them to travel from the castle to the front of Oakfeather, in the middle of the forest. They had been flying relatively fast, but the forest expanse wasn't something to be taken lightly. She had been cautioned many times about entering it when she was a child, because though the forest stood right outside her home, the paths between the trees were treacherous, and even seasoned explorers would sometimes get lost and never find their way out. Unpredictable dangers filled the vast ancient woods, and the squirrels of Oakfeather were among the few that understood the forest well enough to travel within unharmed. The village happened to be the only notable place in the forest which was always safe to welcome visitors, but difficult to reach because of its location. They set anchor in the clearing before the great tree and settled down gently onto the ground. Angelica looked up at the flag depicting a hawk with ears, It hung from a landing which had been built onto the collar of a severed branch. Above the flag was a doorway, and below the flag a stairway led into the trunk, serving as the village's main entrance. The vaulted entryway and the ornamental newel posts at the base of the stones inlaid in them that shone brightly like the sun's reflection on the planet Sarzana at night. "Luminor, what a sight to see!" exclaimed the captain, with a bright look on his face, as if he was a boy beaming at a new toy. "Those are the stones of the light element. Many of the great cities covet Luminor and use it to light their halls, but none so much as Oakfeather. You, too, are sure to love visiting this tree village." Angelica nodded intently, but she was starting to lose patience. Though they had only just started flying, she was excited to disembark and see a new village that she had often dreamed of visiting. The captain tried to continue. "I'm sure that the village folk of Oakfeather will assist you in acquiring a Luminor from the forest, if that is what you wish. But be warned, there—" Angelica lost her ability to wait, and thoughtlessly cut the captain off when she jumped down from the ship and ran towards the stairway. "Somebody stop her before she gets herself into a mess," Captain Vega shouted. John Pierre and Marcus Finnegan sprinted in pursuit of her, as swiftly as their legs would carry them, but Angelica ran up the steps and disappeared before they could catch her. As Angelica rose to the top step, she came face to face with the crested honey buzzard. Instinctively, she let out a piercing scream, alarming John and Marcus, who still were quite far behind her, only part way up the staircase. Both guards drew their weapons as they dashed to the top of the stairs. When they arrived, they saw the bird of prey towering over Angelica. They quickly sprang into action, shouting, raising their tridents, and bolstering their shields. Their unexpected offensive behavior alarmed the bird, who spread his wings wide and let out a terrible squawk. The bird hadn't expected armed squirrels to charge into his domain, ready for battle. He had seen the ship flying in, and he had emerged only to greet everyone. Because the upcoming voyage when Captain Vega would bring the princess to the village had been the main topic of conversation at the last time the captain visited him in Oakfeather, he naturally thought that the princess would learn about him before her arrival. He had intended to impress her by greeting her in his most majestic form. It was clear to him now that this had been a big mistake. Captain Vega heard the commotion while he hurried up the stairs. He knew at once that his friend of many years had unintentionally frightened Angelica. Foreseeing the problem, he was trying to avoid it by explaining the nature of the village before they arrived. But the three companions hadn't stayed to listen to him, and he never had the chance to tell them the essential part of what he was trying to say. "Stop it, everyone! Put down your weapons! He's not an enemy," he shouted as he charged into the room, throwing himself to his knee. Marcus and John threw down their tridents and shields, and then threw themselves to the floor as well. While everyone watched, the enormous bird of prey that had been towering over them began to shrink in size and change in shape as he bowed in the same manner as the captain. A squirrel-like hand extended from under his wing. Ears grew from his brow, and a bushy squirrel tail sprouted in place of the tail feathers that had been there. As the assumed danger of the situation dissolved, Angelica was relieved, and she saw that whoever this was, he wasn't going to eat her, and no one was going to sustain injury. She smiled and curtsied to the figure standing before her. The new host was now calm enough to take a good long look at the princess. Although he had heard from Vega about the arrival of Princess Angelica Cherryfur, he didn't know what to expect. It turned out that he found her to be strikingly beautiful, and her gentle demeanor went a long way toward helping to calm him down. He continued to shrink and change shape until he was a much more familiar shape to them. He was, in fact, a squirrel, of the same height as Angelica. Everyone who was not standing now stood. Angelica finally got a moment to take in the surrounding halls. She felt astounded at how the walls had been carved out in such a way that the light of the luminor gave a forest-like impression, even though they were inside a tree. She had expected the interior of the village to have a more synthetic feeling to it, with little color or decoration, based on her reading about architecture in the world beyond Rubra. Instead, she was pleasantly surprised by its natural appearance and intricate design. After taking in her new surroundings in a new light, her eyes drew back towards the squirrel, who was now standing before her. For her part, he was by far the most handsome cinnamon-furred squirrel that Angelica Cherryfur had ever laid eyes upon, and he had his eyes fixated on hers. She felt a strange new sensation in her chest, and the fur around her neck stood on end. He spoke to her in a warm and gentle voice. "Greetings, and welcome to my village. I'm sorry that I alarmed you, beautiful princess of Agrifolia. I was also frightened, to be honest," he chuckled. "My name is Dylan Furtallen, and I'm the chief of Oakfeather. My people are a tribe of Falco-esque squirrelans who have lived in the forest for several centuries." Dylan stepped forward. "There are many legends about how our people came to be the way they are. The most commonly believed legend is that long ago, a great hawk attacked our ancestor, who bested the hawk in wits and defeated him in combat, tying his spirit into eternal servitude. We aren't quite certain it happened that way, but I carry this hawk talon around my neck as proof of chiefdom." He removed his necklace momentarily to show Angelica. "It supposedly has been passed down from chief to chief since the beginning. Enough of that talk, though. Vega, why didn't you tell the princess and her guards about the traits of my people beforehand? Someone could have been killed." Vega replied, "I'm sorry. I had just explained the luminor, and I was starting to try to explain the people of the village when the princess jumped ship and ran towards the tree. I should have told her earlier." He had his face pointed down and was staring off to the side in embarrassment. But Dylan came up and gave him a hefty pat on the shoulder and said, "Everyone's safe, and now I know you tried to explain and couldn't. You don't need to worry about it. It's good to see you, old friend." Well, thanks for listening. I need to get going for now, but yeah, you can find the book on Amazon. I'll put up a link, and yeah, I'll read more pretty soon. Goodbye.